Royal Guard Tier's open delivery van finds Charlotte's torn coat hidden in back. Charlotte woke up that morning with a heavy feeling in her chest, the kind that made every small task seem harder than usual. She moved slowly through her apartment, brushing her hair, tying her shoes, and gathering her bag while her mind replayed the same moment again and again. The moment she realized the valuable coat she had been transporting had gone missing. It was not just any coat. It was an old, beautifully preserved garment that once belonged to a royal figure. Charlotte had studied it for months while preparing an exhibit for the Palace Museum. She knew every thread of its stitching, every faded detail, and every soft crease created by years of careful preservation. Losing it felt like losing a piece of history, something she believed she was responsible for protecting. As she made her way toward the palace, the cool morning air brushed against her face, and she hoped it would help calm her thoughts. It didn't. Her steps were usually light and excited. She loved her work, but today they were slow and uncertain. She kept imagining the disappointed faces of her supervisors, the questions they would ask, and the explanations she did not have. Charlotte believed in doing everything with care, and the thought of having failed in her duty filled her with worry that she didn't know how to hide. When she entered the museum wing of the palace, she tried to move quietly, hoping not to attract attention. But even without speaking, people around her sensed something was wrong. Charlotte always greeted everyone with warmth, but this morning she kept her eyes down and walked quickly to her office. A few staff members exchanged curious looks. They could tell she wasn't herself. Sergeant Alden Rowe, one of the palace guards, noticed her more than anyone else. He had worked at the palace for many years, and he had seen visitors, staff members, and dignitaries come and go. Over time, he had also learned to read the smallest changes in people's expressions. When he saw Charlotte slip by quietly, clutching her bag a little too tightly, he felt a spark of concern. Charlotte was usually cheerful and full of energy. Something was troubling her, and Alden knew enough about the museum staff to understand that anything involving a historical object was taken very seriously. He didn't approach her immediately. Alden was thoughtful that way. He believed people sometimes needed a little time before speaking about what bothered them. Still, he kept an eye on her whenever his patrol brought him near the museum area. He saw how she sat at her desk, staring at an empty space, as if trying to gather courage to face something difficult. He watched her open her notebook, close it again, and then take a deep breath that did not seem to help very much. Inside Charlotte's office, her thoughts raced. She replayed the night before over and over like an unfinished puzzle. She remembered packing the coat carefully into its protective case. She remembered loading it into the small car the museum provided for transports. She remembered driving through familiar streets. She remembered arriving at her building. But somewhere between those moments, the coat had disappeared. She could not understand how. She had not left the car unattended long enough for anyone to open it. She had double-checked the locks, the case, and everything else she could think of. Every time she tried to solve the mystery, a new wave of worry rose inside her. The coat was more than valuable. It represented a story from a time long before she was born. Charlotte had always felt grateful to work around such objects, and she treated them almost like living things that needed her protection. Losing one made her feel as if she had failed the trust placed in her by the museum, by history itself, and even by her own dreams. Around mid-morning, the museum director stopped by her office. He was kind but puzzled. He asked her if she had brought the coat for the exhibit preparations. Charlotte froze for a moment. Her throat tightened, and she felt a warm pressure behind her eyes. She managed only a small shake of her head and said she needed a little more time. The director, sensing she was overwhelmed, did not press further, but his soft concern only deepened Charlotte's guilt. She wished she could tell him everything, but she feared the consequences. She feared she might lose her job or disappoint the people who had trusted her. Outside the office, whispers began to travel through the staff rooms. No one knew exactly what was wrong, but they knew something important was missing from the exhibit preparations. Rumors always grew quickly in such places, especially when precious artifacts were involved. Some people wondered if a delay in shipping had occurred. Others quietly questioned whether Charlotte might be having a hard week, but no one suspected the truth, not yet. Alden, however, could tell that this was not a simple delay. He had patrolled the palace long enough to recognize when something serious was happening. He decided to walk through the museum corridors once more, hoping he might catch a moment when he could offer help without making Charlotte uncomfortable. He didn't want to intrude, but he also didn't want her to carry something heavy alone. When he finally passed her office, he paused by the doorway. Charlotte looked up, surprised but also slightly relieved to see him. Alden greeted her gently, asking if everything was all right. His voice was calm and steady, the kind of voice that made people feel that the world was not falling apart as badly as they feared. Charlotte hesitated, pressing her fingers together, unsure how much to say. She didn't want to worry him or bring trouble to the palace, so she simply replied that she was dealing with a difficult situation. Alden nodded with understanding, even though he could see she was hiding something more. He didn't push her. Instead, he reminded her that the guards were always available if she needed assistance, whether with a task or a concern. Charlotte gave a small smile, one that tried to be sincere but couldn't hide the weight she carried. After he left, she felt a small sense of comfort, though it did little to solve her problem. The morning drifted on, but Charlotte's anxiety grew with each hour that passed. She knew she needed to report the missing coat soon. Museum policy required it. But every time she thought about walking to the director's office, her courage failed her. She imagined the disappointment, the questions, the procedures that would follow. She imagined headlines in newspapers, even though that was unlikely. She imagined the coat being gone forever. Meanwhile, Alden continued his patrol around the palace grounds. Even as he walked past the gardens, the gates, and the long stone hallways, his mind kept returning to Charlotte's troubled expression. He respected her work and knew how dedicated she was. Something significant must have happened for her to appear so shaken. Alden had always taken pride in protecting the palace and everything within it, its people, its history, and its quiet routines. Seeing any of those things unsettled stirred a sense of responsibility in him. By noon, the palace courtyard had become busy with deliveries, visitors, and preparations for the upcoming exhibit. Carts rolled across the stone paths, workers discussed schedules, and guards guided guests through proper entrances. To most people, it was an ordinary day. But for Charlotte, it was a day filled with uncertainty. Every sound around her felt sharper. Every conversation felt heavier. She sat at her desk, tracing a finger along the edge of her notebook, wishing she could turn back time by just a few hours. Though she did her best to stay unnoticed, her silence only made more people wonder. Charlotte knew rumors were forming, but she couldn't bring herself to care about them. All she could think about was the missing coat, the smooth blue fabric, the delicate stitching, the years of care that had kept it preserved. She remembered how proud she felt when she first held it, knowing she would help present it in a display seen by countless visitors. That pride now felt like a distant memory. Still, even with all the heaviness of the morning, a small part of Charlotte hoped the coat might somehow appear. Maybe she had overlooked something. Maybe she had placed it somewhere unusual in a moment of distraction. She searched her office again, even though she had already looked several times. She checked her bag, her drawers, even the storage rooms nearby. Each time she found nothing, the ache in her chest grew. Alden crossed paths with her once more in the hallway. She did not notice him at first, but when she looked up and saw him watching her with concern, she managed a polite nod. She appreciated his quiet presence more than she could express. Alden wondered whether he should ask again if she needed help, but he decided to give her space for now. He sensed that something important was unfolding, but he also felt that he would understand it fully in time. By early afternoon, the calm rhythm of the palace was beginning to shift, and although Charlotte did not know it yet, the events set in motion that morning would soon lead to discoveries she never expected. As the afternoon sunlight settled gently over the palace grounds, the usual routine continued with quiet order. Delivery vehicles lined up near the service entrance, workers moved between buildings carrying boxes and equipment, and visitors admired the grand architecture while taking photos. For most people, it was an ordinary day. But for Alden, something did not feel quite right. He had been a palace guard long enough to trust his instincts, and today those instincts were whispering that something unusual was happening. While watching the flow of activity, his attention kept returning to Charlotte. Even at a distance, he could sense the worry she was trying so hard to hide. Her expression, usually bright and full of curiosity, was clouded with concern. She walked as though her thoughts weighed more than anything she carried in her hands. Alden felt a quiet responsibility to keep an eye on her, not because she was in trouble, but because she clearly needed someone to pay attention. As deliveries continued to arrive, a white delivery van pulled into the courtyard. It was an ordinary-looking vehicle, with a plain logo painted on the side and a simple number on the rear door. The driver wore a standard uniform and appeared to be a routine worker, but something about the scene caught Alden's attention immediately. The van did not appear on the scheduled list for the day. Every vehicle entering palace grounds was supposed to be logged and checked ahead of time, yet this one was not familiar. Alden stepped closer to confirm the details, but as he approached, he noticed the driver glancing around with a nervous expression. The driver kept tapping the steering wheel, shifting his weight uncomfortably and scanning the area as though he expected someone to confront him. His eyes lingered on the palace doors longer than necessary, then darted away again. Alden had seen many delivery workers over the years, and most moved with calm confidence because they knew the routine. This driver, however, seemed unsure of himself. Alden approached the van politely, offering a friendly greeting. The driver returned the greeting, but his voice wavered slightly. Alden asked which department he was delivering to, expecting a simple answer. Instead, the driver hesitated and gave a vague description that didn't match any department Alden knew. He spoke quickly, as though trying to sound convincing, but the uncertainty in his words made the explanation feel incomplete. Alden gently asked to see the delivery paperwork. The driver fumbled with a stack of papers and handed over a sheet that looked like a standard delivery form, but the details were strangely vague. The company name was real, but the order number didn't match the usual format used for palace deliveries. The listed item was simply described as general supplies, which could mean anything. Alden's instincts sharpened. Something was not lining up the way it should. While Alden inspected the form, the driver kept glancing toward the back of the van. His nervous movements grew more noticeable, as if he wanted to finish the drop-off quickly and be gone before anyone asked too many questions. Alden remained calm but attentive. He had been trained to notice small details, and each passing moment only made him more certain that something about this delivery needed closer attention. He asked the driver to wait while he confirmed with the logistics office. Usually such checks took only a minute, but the driver immediately grew uneasy. His posture stiffened, and he carefully adjusted the papers in his hand, as if trying to prepare an explanation in case Alden returned with questions. Alden did not accuse him of anything. He simply walked a few steps away and contacted the palace logistics coordinator. The coordinator confirmed what Alden already suspected: the delivery was not on the schedule. No supplies from that company were expected. Alden returned to the van with a calm expression. He thanked the driver again and mentioned that the delivery wasn't listed in their system. He requested to verify the cargo before allowing it through. This was normal procedure, and most drivers understood the importance of palace security. But instead of relaxing and agreeing, the driver tensed further. He forced a smile and insisted the delivery must be new, perhaps added last minute. Yet he could not name the department, nor provide a contact person at the palace who had placed the order. Alden's concern grew deeper. He knew better than to make assumptions, but everything about the situation felt unusual. He observed the van more closely. The cargo area appeared deeper than expected, and faint marks on the floor near the rear door suggested the inside had been rearranged recently. Even the way the driver stood, leaning slightly to one side, keeping one hand near the door, hinted that he was trying to hide something rather than complete a simple job. He asked again, gently but firmly, to inspect the back of the van. For a moment, the driver did not move. Then, without offering a reason, he reluctantly walked to the back and unlocked the doors. When he opened them, the view revealed several crates stacked neatly. They were labeled with general terms, the kind often used for maintenance supplies, yet the labels looked too new, as though they had been printed quickly. The crates were closed tightly, with no way to see what was inside. Even more strange was the fact that the crates were placed in a way that left a narrow walkway along one side. Most real supply deliveries used the space more efficiently. These crates seemed positioned more for concealment than transport. Alden stepped closer to examine the cargo, but the driver subtly shifted to block his view of one area of the van. The movement was small but noticeable. The driver's shoulders tightened as Alden approached, and he quickly explained that he was running behind schedule and needed to deliver the items soon. Alden offered a reassuring smile, saying the check would only take a moment. He had learned that staying calm often helped reveal the truth more clearly than pressure. As he looked more carefully into the van, something at the far back caught his eye. A piece of fabric, barely visible beneath a crate, seemed out of place. It was only a small corner, perhaps nothing more than packing material, but the color struck him immediately. A soft, deep blue that reminded him of the coat he had seen Charlotte preparing days earlier. Alden did not jump to conclusions, but the unusual delivery, the nervous driver, and the misplaced fabric created a connection in his mind he could not ignore. He asked the driver why the crates were stacked in such an uneven pattern. The driver gave a short, uncertain explanation, saying the items had been loaded quickly. Alden nodded politely but remained thoughtful. The palace had clear rules for incoming items, and he knew he needed to look further. Before he could continue his inspection, Charlotte appeared at the entrance to the courtyard. She had stepped outside to take a short walk, hoping fresh air might help her regain composure after hours of worry. When she saw Alden near the van, she almost kept walking until her gaze landed on the small piece of blue fabric at the back of the vehicle. Her steps faltered. Her breath caught quietly in her throat. She recognized the color instantly. Charlotte did not cry out or rush forward. Instead, she froze in place as a mix of disbelief and hope washed over her. She knew she should remain calm, but the sight of that familiar shade brought a sudden surge of emotion she had not felt all day. She had spent hours imagining where the coat could be, and now here was a piece of fabric that looked exactly like it. Alden noticed Charlotte's change in expression. He followed her gaze back to the fabric and felt his heart tighten slightly. If the fabric belonged to the missing coat, then this situation was even more serious than he thought. He approached Charlotte gently and asked if she recognized the color. She nodded slowly, unable to find her voice. Seeing her reaction confirmed for Alden that he needed to handle the situation with great care. He turned back to the driver with a calm but more firm tone. He said he needed to inspect the crates one by one and verify all items inside. The driver's uneasiness grew more obvious. He tried to explain again that the delivery was routine, but Alden politely reminded him of palace policy. Everything entering the grounds needed proper inspection. Unsure how to respond, the driver hesitated. He looked at the crates and then back at Alden, as though trying to decide what to do next. His nervousness became clearer by the second, and the more he tried to hide it, the more noticeable it became. Alden stepped aside briefly and requested assistance from another guard, who soon arrived. When the second guard walked over, the atmosphere changed slightly. The driver shifted uneasily, now faced with two calm, observant guards instead of one. Charlotte stood at a distance, watching quietly. She didn't want to interfere, yet she couldn't look away. Her mind filled with questions. How could the coat have ended up in a delivery van? Why would anyone hide it inside a stack of crates? What had she missed the night before? She felt a mix of confusion and unease, but also a tiny spark of hope. Hope that the coat might be closer than she had dared to believe. As Alden continued slowly checking the crates, the driver became increasingly unsettled. He adjusted the hem of his uniform repeatedly, tapped his foot, and glanced toward the palace gate as though imagining leaving early. But Alden was patient and steady. He knew that sometimes the truth revealed itself simply by giving it space. The crates were ordinary, yet something about the arrangement felt deliberate, and that single piece of blue fabric at the back bothered Alden deeply. He felt certain now that something important was hidden inside the van. He just needed enough time to uncover what it was. Charlotte watched as Alden gently lifted a crate. Her heart thumped in her chest, each second stretching into long, breathless moments. She held her hands together tightly, unsure if she should hope or brace herself for disappointment. Alden leaned in closer, noticing faint scuff marks on the floor of the van that suggested something had been dragged or shifted recently. His eyes then moved again to the blue fabric in the corner. The crate beside it seemed suspiciously heavy for its size, as though hiding more than simple supplies. He knew he was getting closer to an answer, one that connected Charlotte's distress, the missing coat, and this unusual delivery. And although he did not yet know the full truth, he could feel the story beginning to unfold right before him. Alden stood quietly beside the open delivery van, studying every small detail with thoughtful eyes. He did not rush, and he did not pressure anyone. His calm presence made even tense moments feel steady, like a peaceful morning breeze passing through a crowded courtyard. Charlotte remained a few steps away, unable to look away from the scene. Deep inside, she hoped for clarity, but she was also afraid of what they might find. Her heart moved between hope and worry with every slow second that passed. The other guard, who had joined Alden earlier, waited patiently for instructions. He respected Alden's thoughtful approach and understood that this inspection required patience rather than force. Together, they worked in quiet harmony, both attentive, both observant, both wanting to understand the situation without creating discomfort. The driver kept shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He rubbed his hands together, then folded them, then let them hang loosely again. His eyes darted across the courtyard, over the flower beds, the stone pathways, the palace walls. He acted like someone who wanted to be anywhere else but here. Yet he tried to disguise this with a smile that faded too quickly each time he forced it. Alden turned back toward the crates. The first few had been opened and checked carefully. They contained harmless items, basic supplies, clean cloths, small tools, and maintenance materials. Everything inside them looked fine, but Alden still felt something unusual beneath the surface. The crates were positioned in a strange way, leaving gaps that seemed unnecessary. The labels looked printed quickly, as if someone had rushed to prepare them. He moved toward the crate closest to the corner where the blue fabric peeked out. Charlotte's breath caught slightly when she saw him approaching it. She pressed her fingers together, her stomach tightening with anticipation. She reminded herself not to jump to conclusions, even though every part of the scene pointed toward something meaningful. Alden paused before touching the crate. Something felt different about it compared to the others. It was not the shape, because it looked similar to the rest. It was not the label, because that too was simple and bland. Instead, it was the weight. When he lightly pressed one hand against the top of the crate, he felt a heaviness that didn't match the size. His brows lifted ever so slightly, and he exchanged a look with the other guard, who nodded back in silent agreement. Before opening it, Alden gently shifted the crate a few centimeters to one side. The driver immediately stepped forward with a quick, nervous movement. He tried to explain that the crate held fragile items and should not be moved too much. His words came fast and uneven, almost tumbling over one another. Alden listened politely but did not stop his gentle inspection. He thanked the driver for the concern, but explained that palace procedure required careful checking. Charlotte watched this exchange closely. Each nervous gesture from the driver made her more certain that something important was inside that crate. Her hands trembled slightly, so she clasped them behind her back to steady them. The sunlight glowed softly around her as she stood near one of the tall stone columns, waiting for whatever would come next. Alden crouched beside the crate and began to examine it more carefully. He noticed faint marks on the wooden surface, little scratches near the bottom edges, as if the crate had been slid along a rough floor. The marks did not match the other crates. He also saw a tiny splinter missing near the top corner, which suggested the crate might have been opened recently, and perhaps more than once. The driver's gaze followed Alden's every move. He shifted his stance, adjusted his collar, then wiped his palms on the sides of his uniform. Although he tried to act casual, his nervousness was growing clearer. He asked again if this much checking was necessary, insisting the items inside were ordinary and harmless. But his voice carried a faint tremble that he could not hide. Alden did not react with suspicion. Instead, he responded gently, saying that palace safety required consistency and every delivery, no matter how small, was treated with equal importance. His calm tone removed any tension from the air, yet it also made it clear that the inspection would continue. Charlotte stepped a little closer, though she kept a respectful distance. Her footsteps were light, almost hesitant. Part of her wanted to ask Alden directly about the fabric, but she held back, trusting him to uncover the truth with patience and care. Alden finally prepared to open the crate. Using a small inspection tool, he carefully lifted the lid. The crate opened slowly, revealing its contents. Inside, several neatly folded pieces of fabric lay stacked from top to bottom. They were plain fabrics in neutral colors, browns, whites, and light grays, commonly used for cleaning or packing. At first glance, everything appeared normal, but Alden noticed something beneath the top folds. A tightly packed layer seemed slightly uneven. The way the cloth sat on top looked almost too neat, like someone had arranged it to hide something underneath. The edges of the cloth were pressed down firmly, as if someone wanted to prevent any movement from revealing the hidden layer. Alden gently lifted a few pieces, one at a time. Beneath the fourth layer, he found something unusual. The cloth changed texture. It became softer and more delicate, like the type used for wrapping valuable or fragile items. His fingers brushed the smooth surface, and he felt a faint sense of recognition. He continued lifting the fabric layer with slow, careful movements. Charlotte held her breath. Her heartbeat echoed softly in her ears, faster and louder. She leaned forward ever so slightly, unable to look away. Beneath that layer of cloth, Alden found a long, narrow container. It was not large, and it did not take up the whole crate. Yet its presence stood out immediately. The container had a soft fabric exterior, similar to the protective cases used in museums to transport preserved garments. It was pale beige in color, with a thin strap looped around it. Alden reached out and touched the container gently. The shape inside seemed to match the curve of folded clothing. His heart gave a quiet thump of recognition. He lifted the case carefully, holding it with both hands. It felt heavier than ordinary clothing, but not too heavy, just the right weight for a historical garment wrapped with layers of protective material. The driver stepped forward quickly, almost too quickly. He opened his mouth to object, but the words came out confused and tangled. Alden paused and turned to him kindly, thanking him again for cooperating. He reminded the driver that everything needed proper checking, especially items packed inside containers within crates. Charlotte could barely breathe now, her eyes locked onto the pale case. She knew its shape. She had handled it many times. It looked exactly like the protective case she used the night before to transport the coat. Her mind raced with questions. How did her case get here? Who moved it? Why was it hidden? Alden slowly unzipped the case. He opened it just enough to see inside, being extremely careful. Charlotte instinctively stepped closer, her hands pressing gently against her heart. When the case opened a few centimeters, a familiar shimmer of blue appeared inside. The fabric, delicate and smooth, reflected the sunlight softly. Charlotte gasped quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a soft, trembling sound that held both relief and shock. She recognized the deep blue shade instantly. It was the coat, or at least part of it. She saw the torn edge of the sleeve, just as she remembered from the moment she realized it was missing. Alden looked up and met Charlotte's eyes. His calm expression softened further when he saw her reaction. He didn't need to ask if she recognized the garment. Her eyes told the entire story. The driver, meanwhile, stood frozen. He looked from Alden to Charlotte, then to the case, unable to form words. His uneasy posture grew even more noticeable. He adjusted his uniform once more, but his hands trembled slightly. He tried to speak, but his voice faltered. Alden did not confront him. He did not accuse him. Instead, he simply closed the case gently and held it with care. His voice remained soft as he told Charlotte that the garment inside appeared to be the one she had been searching for. Charlotte nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes, not tears of sadness, but tears of overwhelming relief. The other guard stepped forward to stand beside Alden, offering support without saying a word. Together, they created a calm and respectful presence, protecting both Charlotte's emotions and the fragile garment that had been missing for hours. Alden then asked the driver politely if he could explain how the crate came to contain this case. The driver shifted uncomfortably. He looked toward the palace gate again, then at the ground, then at the crates. He spoke softly, saying he didn't pack the van himself and that the crates were prepared for him earlier that morning. He insisted he didn't know what was inside them. His explanation was uncertain and incomplete, but Alden did not respond with doubt. Instead, he simply thanked the driver for answering and explained that someone would need to review the delivery paperwork more carefully. Charlotte could hardly believe the coat was so close. She took a few slow steps toward Alden, who offered the case to her gently. She held it with trembling hands. Even through the layers of protective fabric, she could feel its familiar weight. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the relief wash over her like warm sunlight. Alden stood quietly beside her, giving her time to breathe. He knew the significance of this discovery. He understood how much the coat meant to her, not just as part of her job, but as something she cared deeply about. The courtyard, once filled with quiet activity, now felt still. The air seemed to settle around them, carrying a gentle sense of resolution. Yet there were still unanswered questions, important questions that would shape what came next. But for this moment, Charlotte felt lighter than she had all day. The missing coat was found, carefully protected, and no longer lost in the uncertainty of the morning. The small piece of torn fabric she first noticed now made perfect sense. It had been a hint, a quiet clue leading to the truth. Alden watched her with a reassuring smile. The story was not over yet, but the first step toward understanding had been taken. And he was determined to help her uncover the rest with the same patience and care he had shown from the beginning. Charlotte held the protective case close to her chest, almost as if she needed to feel its weight to believe it was truly there. For hours she had feared the worst, imagining the historical coat lost forever. Now, even though the case was still zipped and she had not yet seen the full garment inside, the relief she felt spread through her like warm sunlight after a long storm. The afternoon air seemed lighter, and even the distant sounds of birds in the courtyard felt calmer. But along with relief came a quiet trembling inside her. She knew that finding the coat was only the beginning. How it ended up hidden in a delivery van, tucked inside a crate beneath layers of cloth, was a mystery that could not be ignored. She knew she needed to explain everything, especially the part she had been too afraid to share earlier. Alden watched her carefully, sensing the shift in her emotions. His calm presence had guided the situation with kindness and understanding, and now he waited patiently, giving Charlotte space to speak when she was ready. The other guard remained nearby, respectful and quiet, understanding that this moment was not simply about a misplaced object. It was about someone's trust, fear, and honesty. Charlotte opened her eyes slowly, then looked up at Alden. His expression held no judgment, only gentle encouragement. She knew this was the right moment. She felt the weight of her silence, the worry she had carried since the previous night, and she understood she could not hold it inside any longer. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her voice came out soft at first, like a whisper carried by a breeze. She apologized for not speaking earlier and explained that the coat disappearing had frightened her more than she expected. She described how she had transported it the night before, how she had been careful, how she had double-checked everything, and how she had still felt watched somehow, as if someone had been following her. Alden listened closely. His eyes remained gentle, encouraging her to continue. Charlotte wasn't someone who usually struggled with confidence, yet the events of the last few hours had shaken her deeply. Sharing the truth felt difficult, but Alden's steady attention made it easier. She explained how, when she reached her apartment building, she noticed a car parked across the street with its lights dimmed. She had thought it was just a neighbor or someone waiting for a friend, but when she stepped out of her car with the protective case in her hands, she felt something she couldn't describe, a sudden sense of being observed. She admitted she didn't see anyone clearly, but the uneasy feeling stayed with her all the way to her door. She paused, remembering the moment more clearly than she wished. She had placed the case on her dining table, intending to put it away properly after setting down her bag. But when she returned only moments later, distracted by a ringing phone and a message she needed to answer, the case was gone. It had simply vanished from the place she had set it. At this point in her story, Charlotte lowered her gaze, her voice trembling slightly. She confessed she had panicked. She had searched her entire apartment, checked the hallway twice, even walked back down the stairs to look near her car. But she found nothing. The protective case, along with the coat inside, had disappeared completely. She told Alden that she wanted to call someone for help, but fear held her back. She worried she would be blamed. She worried the museum would lose trust in her. She even worried that people would think she was careless. The coat was not just valuable to her job. It meant something personal. She had spent months studying it, preparing it for display, and telling staff members stories she uncovered about its history. Losing it felt like losing more than an object. It felt like losing her own sense of purpose. Alden stayed quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. He knew she needed understanding, not criticism. He thanked her softly for sharing her story, acknowledging how difficult it must have been for her to hold all of that inside. His voice carried reassurance, reminding her that the important thing now was truth, not blame. Charlotte's posture relaxed slightly, as though her shoulders had been carrying invisible weight. For the first time all day, she felt like she wasn't facing her worries alone. She wiped a small tear with the back of her hand, then inhaled slowly. She still feared the consequences of having stayed silent, but being honest now felt like a step toward repairing everything. The driver, who had been listening to bits and pieces from a distance, shifted uneasily. His eyes kept flicking between Charlotte and the guards, as if he wanted to say something but didn't know whether he should. His nervousness had been obvious from the start, but now his behavior seemed driven by something else, perhaps embarrassment, confusion, or fear of misunderstanding. He cleared his throat softly, but no words followed. Alden turned politely toward him, not with suspicion but with mild curiosity. He thanked the driver again for cooperating and asked gently if he could share anything that might help clarify how the coat ended up inside the crate. The driver hesitated. He rubbed the side of his neck and let out a long breath. His voice, when it finally emerged, was quiet and uneven. He explained that he was new to the job and had only recently started helping with deliveries between warehouses and storage facilities. That morning, the crates had already been loaded into his van by another worker. He admitted he didn't question what was inside because he thought it was simply part of normal procedures. He wasn't familiar with the rules for palace deliveries yet and didn't realize anything needed special clearance. His words sounded sincere. He wasn't trying to make excuses. He simply seemed overwhelmed by the situation. He repeated that he didn't know the garment was there. His voice carried a humble tone, as though he regretted being involved in something confusing that caused so much concern. Alden nodded understandingly. He thanked the driver for explaining and reassured him that everything would be looked into fairly. There was no accusation in his tone, only calm professionalism. Charlotte watched all of this quietly. She did not feel anger toward the driver. If anything, she felt sympathy for him. She understood what it was like to feel overwhelmed, confused, and unsure of what to say. Her heart softened further because she knew mistakes could happen, and she didn't want anyone to feel the same guilt she had carried all morning. After speaking with the driver, Alden turned back to Charlotte. He gently suggested they open the protective case more fully to confirm the coat's condition. Charlotte nodded, her fingers trembling slightly as she unzipped it with care. The soft fabric layers inside parted slowly, revealing more of the familiar blue garment. The coat lay curled neatly inside, just as she had placed it hours earlier, except for the torn sleeve, which now showed more clearly. Charlotte reached out and touched the fabric, feeling its softness beneath her fingertips. Relief washed over her again, but this time mixed with sadness at the damage. Still, she reminded herself that the coat was safe. That alone mattered more than anything else at this moment. Alden admired the garment quietly, understanding its importance from the way Charlotte handled it. He asked gently if she recognized anything unusual about the tier, anything that might help them understand what had happened. She shook her head softly, explaining that she had noticed the tear only after returning home. She had no idea when or how it occurred. The air around them felt calm again, though curious whispers drifted from nearby staff members observing the scene from a distance. Word of the unusual delivery had started spreading, but Alden kept everything orderly and respectful. He signaled to a supervisor to approach, and together they discussed next steps. Charlotte stood by quietly, still holding the case, feeling comforted knowing Alden was guiding the situation. The supervisor listened carefully and reassured Charlotte that she had done the right thing by telling the truth now. He spoke gently, encouraging her not to let fear overshadow her dedication and hard work. His kindness surprised her, and tears formed in her eyes once more, not from sadness, but from relief. Alden stepped slightly to the side, allowing Charlotte and the supervisor to talk while he observed the van again. Something still lingered in his mind, a quiet sense that there was more to uncover, but he didn't want Charlotte to worry about that now. For the moment, he wanted her to breathe, to feel safe, and to know she was supported. Charlotte finally closed the protective case and held it firmly. She thanked Alden softly for helping her find the courage to speak. She admitted that without his calm presence, she might not have said anything until much later. Alden smiled gently, assuring her that she did exactly what she needed to do. Evening light began to soften the courtyard, turning the stone walls into warm shades of gold. Charlotte realized how long the day had felt, how heavy the morning had been, how uncertain the afternoon became, and how unexpectedly hopeful the last hour now seemed. The missing coat had been found, the truth had been shared, and understanding had taken the place of fear. There were still unanswered questions, but Charlotte no longer felt alone in facing them. She felt supported, heard, and guided. Alden remained near the van, watching over the scene with steady calmness, ready to continue uncovering the truth one gentle step at a time. The soft evening light settled over the palace like a warm blanket, bringing a calm feeling after a long day filled with confusion, worry, and unexpected discoveries. Charlotte stood quietly in the courtyard, still holding the protective case that carried the precious royal coat. She felt its weight against her arms, but now that weight no longer frightened her. Instead, it reminded her of how far she had come, from fear to honesty, from panic to relief, and from silence to finally feeling supported. Alden walked toward her slowly, his footsteps soft against the stone ground. He had spent the last hour making sure every detail about the unusual delivery was recorded carefully. Other staff members and guards had come and gone, each helping where needed, but through it all, Alden made sure Charlotte felt safe and included in every decision. Now that the official part of the day was winding down, he returned to her with a gentle smile, the same calm smile that had helped her breathe easier earlier. Charlotte thanked him quietly again, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. She felt grateful not only because he had helped find the coat, but because he had treated her feelings with kindness. Alden nodded in return and reminded her that she had done something very brave by speaking honestly, even when she was afraid of the outcome. His words settled warmly in her heart, and she felt a sense of comfort she hadn't felt since the previous night. The supervisor walked over to them with a relaxed expression, holding a clipboard filled with notes. He announced that the museum team would take the coat inside and prepare it for repair. They would examine the torn sleeve with care and make sure the garment could be restored gently. Charlotte willingly handed the case over, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness as it left her hands. She had carried that coat for months, studied it closely, and treated it with respect. Even though she trusted the team completely, letting it go after such a stressful day felt like releasing a piece of her own worry into the hands of others. The supervisor assured her once more that she was not at fault. Mistakes and unexpected problems happened in every field, especially when handling historical objects. He emphasized that her dedication and commitment had been clear from the beginning, and no one doubted her care. His comforting words eased the last threads of guilt that had been tugging quietly at her heart. With the coat now safely in trusted hands, the courtyard began to empty. Workers finished their tasks, guards rotated shifts, and the golden light slowly softened into cool shades of blue as the sun dipped lower. Charlotte and Alden remained there for a few more moments, both feeling the calmness of the evening. The confusion that had surrounded the day was finally drifting away. Alden suggested they walk a little toward the garden area, where tall hedges and neatly trimmed pathways created a peaceful space away from the busier parts of the palace. Charlotte agreed, grateful for a moment to clear her mind. They walked side by side, their steps unhurried, enjoying the fresh air that carried hints of lavender and rosemary from the surrounding plants. As they walked, Charlotte told Alden how much she loved working at the Palace Museum. She described how she had first become fascinated with historical garments, how each piece told a story about the person who wore it, the time it came from, and the culture it belonged to. She explained how the coat she recovered was one of her favorites because it represented a moment in history filled with elegance and meaning. She had hoped to present it beautifully in the upcoming exhibit so visitors could feel the same admiration she felt. Alden listened attentively, enjoying the way her eyes brightened when she talked about her passion. It was clear she cared deeply about her work, and her words painted a vivid picture of her dedication. He admired her commitment and felt glad that she no longer seemed weighed down by fear. Charlotte then spoke about the moment she realized the coat was missing. She admitted that she had felt embarrassed, confused, and lost, unsure of what to do. She had thought keeping quiet might give her time to fix the problem herself, but instead it had only made her worry grow stronger. She paused and looked at Alden with a soft smile, saying she now understood that asking for help sooner would have been the better choice. Alden reassured her again, reminding her that everyone reacts differently under stress. What mattered was that she had chosen honesty and cooperation when it was needed most. His steady voice reminded her that courage wasn't about never feeling afraid. It was about moving forward despite the fear. They continued walking until they reached a small fountain in the center of the garden. The water bubbled gently, reflecting the soft colors of dusk. Charlotte sat on the edge of the fountain and let out a slow breath. Everything felt calmer now. No one was upset with her. The coat was safe. The palace staff was understanding. The day had ended far better than she imagined when she first arrived with fear in her heart. Alden remained standing nearby, giving her space while also being close enough to offer comfort. After a moment of peaceful silence, Charlotte asked him how he knew something was wrong that morning. She had tried so hard to hide her worry, yet he noticed it immediately. Alden smiled modestly and explained that he had worked at the palace long enough to recognize when someone needed support. He added that Charlotte's usual energy and enthusiasm were easy to spot, so when both were missing, he simply wanted to make sure she was all right. Charlotte felt touched by that. It made her realize that kindness often came from simple observation, from noticing small changes in others and offering help without needing to be asked. They talked for a while longer, sharing small stories about their days, their work, and the small joys they found in palace life. Charlotte found herself laughing softly for the first time since yesterday, and Alden felt relieved to see her smile return. Eventually, Charlotte realized she needed to head back to her office to finish a few tasks before going home. Alden offered to walk her there, and she accepted. The walk back felt lighter than any walk she had taken earlier that day. The palace corridors, which had felt overwhelming in the morning, now felt familiar and safe again. They passed by staff members who greeted them kindly, some offering Charlotte encouraging smiles when they recognized her. When they reached her office, Charlotte paused at the doorway. She turned to Alden with a grateful expression and thanked him once more, this time not just for finding the coat, but for believing in her when she could not believe in herself, and for helping her through a day that could have gone very differently. Alden replied with warm sincerity that he was glad he could help, and he reminded her that she had shown strength by choosing honesty and trust. He said he admired how she handled everything, even when she felt overwhelmed. Charlotte felt her heart warm at his words. She realized that this day, though stressful, had taught her something important about trust, responsibility, and the quiet strength of asking for help. Alden wished her a peaceful evening and promised that the guards would follow up on any remaining questions about the delivery van. Charlotte nodded, feeling confident now that everything was being handled properly. She stepped into her office, and Alden walked away with calm assurance, his footsteps echoing softly down the hall. Charlotte closed the door gently behind her and sat at her desk. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to relax completely. She placed her hands on the table, closed her eyes, and felt a wave of gratitude. She was grateful for Alden's support, for her team's understanding, and for the coat being safe. She knew tomorrow would bring new responsibilities, but tonight she could finally breathe with ease. In the days that followed, the coat was carefully repaired and restored. The exhibit opened beautifully, with visitors admiring every detail of the royal garment. Charlotte stood nearby on opening day, watching people's faces light up as they learned about the coat's history. She felt proud, not only because the garment was displayed perfectly, but because she had played a meaningful part in its journey. Alden stopped by the exhibit on his break, giving her a small smile as he admired the restored coat. Charlotte greeted him warmly, remembering how he had been there through every uncertain moment. Their eyes met with quiet understanding, a reminder of the day when trust and honesty brought clarity to a confusing mystery. Through this experience, Charlotte learned that even in moments filled with fear and uncertainty, support could come from unexpected places. She discovered that courage sometimes began with simply speaking the truth, and that kindness had the power to guide people through even the most unsettling times. The palace returned to its normal rhythm, but Charlotte never forgot the day Alden tore open a mystery, not with force or loudness, but with patience, calm observation, and steady care. The torn coat became a symbol of both the past and the present, a reminder of history's fragility and the strength found in trust. And so, as the palace continued its peaceful routines, Charlotte, Alden, and everyone involved carried with them a renewed sense of connection, responsibility, and quiet gratitude for the way the truth eventually revealed itself. Gently, honestly, and at just the right moment.